Chapter 7, mainly about dwarves. The two column marine soldiers at the head of the column, seeing what they took for a Tarkin, or great lord with 2 armed pages, came to a halt and raised their spears in salute. "Oh, my master," said one of them, "we led these mannequins to Colmarin to work in the mines of the Tisroc, may he live forever." "By the great god Tosh, they are very obedient," said Tyrion. Then suddenly he turned to the dwarves themselves. About 1 in 6 of them carried a torch, and by the flickering light he could see their bearded faces all looking at him with grim and dogged expressions. "Has the Tisroc fought a great battle, dwarfs, and conquered your land?" he asked, "that thus you are patiently to die in the salt pits of Pergahim?" The 2 soldiers glared at him in surprise, but the dwarfs all answered, "Aslan's orders, Aslan's orders. He'd sold us. What can we do against him?" "Tisroc indeed," added one and spat. "I'd like to see him try it." "Silence, dogs," said the chief soldier. "Look," said Tyrion, pulling Puzzle forward into the light. "It's all been a lie. Aslan has not come to Narnia at all. You have been cheated by the ape, and this is the thing he brought out of the stable to show you. Look at it." What the dwarfs saw now, that they could see it close, was certainly enough to make them wonder how they'd ever been taken in. The lion skin had gotten pretty untidy already during Puzzle's imprisonment in the stable, and it had been knocked crooked during his journey through the dark wood. Most of it was a big lump on one shoulder. The head, besides being pushed sideways, had somehow got very far back so that anyone could now see the silly, gentle, donkeyish face gating out of it. Some grass stuck out one corner of his mouth, for he'd been doing a little quiet nibbling as they brought him along. He was muttering, "It wasn't my fault. I'm not very clever. I never said I was." For 1 second, all the dwarves were staring at Puzzle with wide open mouths, and then one of the soldiers said sharply, "Are you mad, my master? What are you doing to those slaves?" And the other said, "And who are you?" Neither of their spears were at a salute now. Both were down and ready for action. "Give the password," said the chief soldier. "This is my password," said the king as he drew his sword. "The light is dawning and the lie broken. Now guard thee, miscreant, for I am Tyrion of Narnia." He flew upon the soldiers like lightning. Eustace, who had drawn his sword when he saw the king draw his, rushed at the other one. His face was deadly pale, but I wouldn't blame him for that. And he had the luck of beginners sometimes have. He forgot at all that Tyrion had tried to teach him that afternoon, slashed wildly. Indeed, I'm not sure his eyes weren't shut, and suddenly found to his own great surprise that the Colmarine lay dead at his feet. And though it was a great relief, it was, at the moment, rather frightening. The king's fight lasted a second or two longer, then he too had killed his man, and he shouted to Eustace, "Where are the other 2? But the dwarfs had settled the 2 remaining Colmarines, and there was no enemy left. "Well struck, Eustace," cried Tyrion, clapping him on the back. "Now, dwarves, you are free. Tomorrow I will lead you to free all Narnia. 3 cheers for Aslan!" But the result which followed was simply wretched. There was a feeble attempt from a few dwarfs, about 5, which died away at once. From several others who were skulky growls, and many said nothing at all. "Don't they understand?" said Jill impatiently. "What's wrong with all you dwarves? Don't you hear what the king says? It's all over. The ape isn't going to rule Narnia any longer. Everyone can go back to ordinary life. You can have fun again. Aren't you glad?" After a pause of nearly a minute, a not very nice-looking dwarf with hair and beard as black as soot said, "And who might you be, missy?" "I'm Jill," she said, "the same Jill who rescued King Rilian from the enchantment, and This is Eustace who did it too. And we've come back from another world after hundreds of years Aslan sent us. The dwarves all looked at one another with grins, smearing grins, not merry ones. And, well, said the black dwarf, whose name was Greffel, I don't know how all you chaps feel, but I've heard about as much about Aslan as I want to hear for the rest of my life. That's right, growled the other dwarves. It's all a plant. It's all a blooming plant. What do you mean? Said Tyrion. He had not been pale when he was fighting, but he was pale now. He had thought this was going to be a beautiful moment, but it was turning out to be more like a bad dream. You mustn't think we're blooming soft in the head. That you must, said Griffel. We've been taken in once, and now you expect us to be taken in the next minute? We've no more use for stories about Aslan. See, look at him, an old moke with long ears. By heaven, you make me mad, said Tyrion. Which of us said that was Aslan? That is the ape's imitation of the real Aslan. Can't you understand? And you've got a better imitation? I suppose, said Griffel. No thanks. We've been fooled once and we're not going to be fooled again. I have not, said Tyrion angrily. I serve the real Aslan. Where is he? Who's he? Show him to us, said the dwarves. Do you think I keep him in my wallet? You fools, said Tyrion. Who am I that I could make Aslan appear at my bidding? He's not a tame lion. The moment those words were out of his mouth, he realized that he had made a false move. The dwarves at once began repeating, not a tame lion, not a tame lion, in a jeering sing-song. That's what the other lot kept telling us, said one. Do you mean you don't believe in the real Aslan, said Jill? But I've seen him. He has sent us here out of a different world. Ah, said Griffel with a broad smile. So you say they've taught you your stuff all right, saying your lessons, aren't you? Churl, cried Tyrion. Will you give a lady a lie to her very face? You keep the civil tongue in your head, master, replied the dwarf. I don't think we want any more kings, and if you are Tyrion, which you don't look like him, no more than we want any Aslans. We're going to look after ourselves from now on and touch our caps to nobody. See? That's right, said the other dwarves. We're on our own now. No more Aslan, no more kings, no more silly stories about other worlds. The dwarves are for the dwarves. And they began to fall into their place and get ready for marching back to wherever they had come from. Little beasts, said Eustace. Aren't you even going to say thank you for being saved from the salt mines? Oh, we know all about that, said Griffel over his shoulder. You wanted to make use of us, and that's why you rescued us. You're playing some game of your own. Come on, chaps. And the dwarfs struck up a queer little marching song, which goes with a drum beat, and off they tramped into the darkness. Tyrion and his friends stared after them. Then he said a single word, come, and they continued their journey. They were a silent party. Puzzle felt himself to be still in disgrace, and he didn't really quite understand what had happened. Jill, besides being disgusted with the dwarves, was very impressed with Eustace's victory over the Colmarine and felt almost shy. As for Eustace, his heart was still beating rather quickly. Tyrion and Jewel walked sadly together in the rear. The king had his arm under the unicorn's shoulder, and sometimes the unicorn nuzzled the king's cheek with his soft nose. They did not try to comfort one another with words. It wasn't very easy to think of anything to say that would be comforting. Tyrion had never dreamed that one of the results of the ape's setting up a false Aslan would be to stop people from believing in the real one. He had felt quite sure that the dwarves would rally to his side the moment he showed them how they had been delivered. And then, next night, he would have led them to the stable hill and shown Puzzle to all of the creatures, and everyone would have turned against the ape. And perhaps, after the scuffle with the Colmarines, the whole thing would have been over. But now, it seemed, he could count on nothing. How many other Narnians might turn the same way the dwarfs? Somebody's coming after us, I think, said Puzzle suddenly. They stopped and listened. Sure enough, there was a thump thump of small feet behind them. Who goes there? Says the king. Only me, sire, came a voice. Me, Pudgeon the dwarf. I've only just managed to get away from the others. I'm on your side, sire, and on Aslan's. See the dwarf? If you can put a dwarfish sword in my fist, I'd gladly strike a blow on the right side before it's all done. Have you ever thought about how many times some people don't understand who Jesus is? Aslan's like that, right? As soon as they understand they can be fooled, they quit believing in the real thing sometimes. It's very, very sad. But there's always somebody like this little dwarf who says, I want to follow Jesus. I hope that's you. Everyone crowded around him and welcomed him and praised him and slapped him on the back. Of course, one single dwarf couldn't make a very great difference, but it was somehow very cheering to have even one. The whole party brightened up, but Jill and Eustace didn't stay bright for very long, for they were now yawning their heads off and too tired to think of anything but bed. It was the coldest hour of the night, just before dawn, that they got back to the tower. And if there had been a meal ready for them, they would have been glad enough to eat, but the bother and delay of getting one was not to be thought of. They drank from a stream, splashed their faces with water, and tumbled into their bunks, except Puzzle and Jewel, who said they'd be more comfortable outside. This perhaps was just as well, for a unicorn and a fat, full-grown donkey indoors always make a room feel rather crowded. Narnian dwarves, though less than 4 feet high, are for their size about the toughest and strongest creatures there are, so that Pudgeon, in spite of a heavy day and a late night, woke fully refreshed before any of the others. He at once took Jill's bow, went out, shot a couple of wood pigeons, and then sat plucking them on the doorstep and chatting to Jewel and Puzzle. Puzzle looked and felt a good deal better this morning. Jewel, being a unicorn and therefore one of the noblest and most delicate of beasts, had been very kind to him, talking to him about things of the sort they could both understand, like grass and sugar and the care of one's hooves. When Jill and Eustace came out of the tower yawning and rubbing their eyes almost 10:30, the dwarf showed them where they could gather plenty of Narnian weed called wild frenzy, which looks rather like our wood sorrel, but tastes a good deal nicer when cooked. It needs a little butter and pepper to make it perfect, but they hadn't these, so that with one thing and another, they had the makings of a capital stew for their breakfast or dinner, whichever you chose to call it. Tyrion went a little further off into the wood with an axe and brought back some branches for fuel. While the meal was cooking, which seemed a very long time, especially as it smelled nicer and nicer the nearer it came to being done, the king found a complete dwarfish outfit for Pudgeon: mail shirt, helmet, shield, sword belt, and dagger. Then he inspected Eustace's sword and found that Eustace had put it back in the sheath, all messy from killing the colmarine. He was scolded for that and made to clean and polish it. All the while, Jill went to and fro, sometimes stirring the pot and sometimes looking out enviously at the donkey and unicorn, who were contentedly grazing. How many times that morning she wished she could eat grass. But when the meal came, everyone felt as if it had been worth waiting for, and there were second helpings all around. When everyone had eaten as much as he could, the 3 humans and the dwarf came and sat on the doorstep. The 4-footed ones lay down facing them. The dwarf, with permission from both Jill and from Tyrion, lit his pipe, and the king said, "Now, friend Pudgeon, you have more news of the enemy, belike, than we. Tell us all you know. At first, what tale do they tell of my escape?" "As cunning a tale, sire, as ever was devised," said Pudgeon. "It was the cat, Ginger, who told it, and most likely made it up, too. The This Ginger, sire, oh, she's a shy boots if ever a cat was, said she was walking past the tree to which those villains bound your majesty, and he said, saving your reverence, that you were howling and swearing and cursing. Aslan, language I wouldn't like to repeat, were his words that he used, looking ever so prim and proper, you know, the way a cat can when it pleases. And then, says Ginger, Aslan himself suddenly appeared in a flash of lightning and swallowed your majesty up in one mouthful. All the beasts trembled at this story, and some fainted right away. And, of course, the ape followed it up. There, he says, see what Aslan does to those who don't respect him. Let all that be a warning to you all. And the poor creatures wailed and whined and said it was its will. So that, in the upshot, your majesty, is your escape, has not set them thinking whether you shall have loyal friends to aid you, but only made them more afraid and more obedient to the ape. What devilish policy, said Tyrion. This Ginger, then, is close to the ape's counsels? It's more a question by now, sir, if the ape is in his counsels, replied the dwarf. The ape is taken to drinking, you see. My belief is that the plot is now mostly carried on by Ginger or Rashada. That's the Colmarine captain. And I think some words that Ginger has scattered among the dwarfs are chiefly to blame for the scurvy return they made of you. And I'll tell you why. One of those dreadful midnight meetings had just broken up the night before last, and I'd gone a bit of the way home when I found I'd left my pipe behind. It was a real good one and an old favorite, so I went back to look for it. But before I got to the place where I'd been sitting, it was black pitch by then, I heard a cat's voice, mew, and a colmarine voice say, here, speak softly. So I just stood as still as if I was frozen. And these two were Ginger and Rashada, Tarkian, as they call him. Noble Tarkian, said the cat in that silky voice of his. I just wanted to know exactly what we both meant today about Aslan meaning no more than Tosh. Doubtless, most sagacious of cats, says the other, you have perceived my meaning. You mean, said Ginger, there are no such persons as either? All who are enlightened know this, said the Tarkian. Then we can understand one another, purrs the cat. Do you, like me, grow a little weary of the ape? A stupid, greedy brute, said the other, but we must use him for the present. Thou and I must provide all things in secret and make the ape do our will. And it would be better, wouldn't it, said Ginger, to let some of the more enlightened Narnians into our council one by one as we find them apt? For the beasts who really believe in Aslan may turn at any moment, and will, if the ape's folly betrays his secret. But those who care neither for Tosh or Aslan, but have only an eye to their own profit and such reward as the Tisroc may give them when Narnia is Colmarine province, will be firm. Excellent, cat, said the captain, but choose which ones carefully. While the dwarf had been speaking, the day seemed to have changed. It had been sunny when they sat down. Now Puzzle shivered and Jewel shifted his head uneasily. Jill looked up. It's clouding over, she said. And it's so cold, said Puzzle. Cold enough by the lion, said Tyrion, blowing on his hands. And, what foul smell is this? Phew, gasped Eustace. It's like something dead. Is there a dead bird somewhere about? And why didn't we notice it before? And with that great upheaval, Jewel scrambled to his feet and pointed with his horn. Look, he cried, look at it, look, look. And all six of them saw, and over all of their faces, there came an expression of utmost dismay. And that's the end of chapter 7.